Wingapo, hello. My name is Rose Powhatan, and I'm descended from the Pamunkey tribe of Indians, which is part of the historic Powhatan Paramountcy, which was an organization of 32 different Indian nations. And the grounds and lands that the Powhatan Paramountcy entailed went all the way from the borders of today's North Carolina up to the Patuxent River and Washington, D.C. But we didn't call the land that we're living in now Washington, D.C. years ago. My ancestors called it Atan Akamik, which means our fertile nation, giving thanks to the Creator for making things in nature to support life. And here I am, seated in this beautiful backyard out in nature in Howard County, Maryland, and I'm going to share some stories with you today that you might find interesting. Years and years ago, when people didn't have the scientific knowledge that they have today, people used to try to figure out how things came to be. And at that time, you had a lot of different stories. For example, a flood story, which led to where men and women came from. Well, it's not unusual to have a flood story in your culture. Practically every group of people in the world has a flood story, and we're no different. And our flood story goes like this. Many, many years ago, before you had two-legged creatures walking on the land that you called men and women because they hadn't been created yet, we had a very special being, almost like a superhero, and his name was Machabo, and he was a giant hare. And Machabo used to have all kinds of adventures all over the place. And one of these adventures had something to do with a flood. But this wasn't any ordinary flood. This was a very serious flood. Anyway, Machabo was out hunting with his friends, the wolves, when all of a sudden he noticed that the river started to get larger and larger, and the water started to overflow into the land. And Machabo gathered his friends around him, all his animal friends, and he had his magic bow and his quiver of magic arrows, and they went to higher land. And they stayed up in that higher land for 40 days and 40 nights when it rained and it was flooding everywhere. And then after a while, the flood waters started to recede. That means they got lower and lower and lower. And Machabo was thinking, he said, now that the flood is over, maybe we can get things going again. So he called Raven over to him and he said, Raven, come here. I want you to fly far, far away from here and see if you can find any sign of land or any plants that could have survived the flood, and then come back to us and let us know where it is so we can go there and start things anew. So Raven took off and he flew far, far away from where Machabo had sent him, and he couldn't find anything. He kept looking down to see if there was any dirt or soil or plants that had survived the flood. He couldn't find anything. So he went back and he told Machabo, I couldn't find any sign of where we could start growing and living again. So Machabo said, maybe Raven couldn't see anything because he was so far up in the sky. This time I'm going to send out Otter, because Otter can go in the water, swim, and then come up if there's any land anywhere, and then that way we can find out where we can go and start things growing again. So he called Otter over to him and said, Otter, I want you to go out and see if you can find any sign of plants that could have survived the flood. and see if there's any rich soil anywhere so we can start our plants and gardens growing again. So Otter said, okay. And Otter went down in the water and swam far, far, far away, farther than Raven had even flown. But Otter couldn't find anything either. He didn't have any good news, so he went back to Machabo. He said, Machabo, I'm so sorry. I couldn't find any rich soil anywhere. I couldn't find any plants that had survived the flood. I'm sorry. So then Machabo said, this time I think I'll ask Muskrat to go out, because Muskrat is very tenacious. Do you know what tenacious means? Tenacious means you never give up. So Machabo called Muskrat over and said, Muskrat, I asked Raven to fly up in the sky to see if he could find any sign of plants or rich soil anywhere. He came back with no news. I sent Otter out, because Otter could go in the water and the land, but Otter came back, couldn't find anything either. But this time I'm sending you out, because you are very tenacious. You never give up. And I know that you're going to find some rich soil, and you're going to find some kind of plants that survived the flood, so we can go to that land and start things growing again. So Muskrat said, okay. And Muskrat took off. She was getting really tired. Oh, she was getting tired. Everything was still just swampy and mucky. And all of a sudden, she noticed the ground was firm. She looked down and she saw a little piece of plant that somehow had survived the flood. She took it and she got some of that rich soil in her claws, and she went back to Machabo. And she said, Machabo, look at this rich soil that I have, that I found. And look at this little bitty plant that I found that survived the flood. And Machabo said, this is wonderful, Muskrat. I knew you weren't going to give up. Why? And she said, because I am very tenacious. And he said, that's right. Now, if you can remember where you went in that travel and take us there, maybe we can get our gardens growing again, and we can see if we can have things growing anew. So Muskrat said, okay. And then Machabo gathered all the animal friends around him, and he put on his quiver of magic arrows, and he had his bow. And you know, when I say bow, I don't mean those little tiny little bows with the rubber-tipped arrows that you find in a dollar store. I mean a tall, 6-foot-tall bow that a warrior would use. And then he said, okay, Muskrat, you take the lead. And Muskrat took everybody on a long trek. And finally, everybody said, hey, the ground feels firm underneath our feet. And people said, because you know we call the animal people. Oh, I see little bits of plants, but they don't look that strong. And is that a twig off of a tree? And Machabo said, leave it to me. And Machabo reached into his quiver of magic arrows, and he fixed it to his bow, and he shot it to all these little plants that were shriveled up in trees, and they started to grow. And then they started to get leaves. and they even got fruit on them. And then all the plants were just wonderful. And the Chavo said, "Muskrat, this is a wonderful thing that you've done to help us get things growing again. And you know what? Since this is such a beautiful garden and we have all these fruits and everything, maybe we should have some people, two-legged people, to help look after it. I think I'll make a man and a woman." So Machabo the giant hare married Muskrat. And that's where men and women came from. But wait, you don't believe me? I know a lot of people believe that we came from monkeys. But if that's so, why is it when you take a photograph, there's always a rude little boy that makes rabbit ears behind your head? That's because they remember Grandfather Machabo the giant hare. Can turtles fly? Can turtles fly? Well, I know a story about a flying turtle. And it's very unusual, but in the end it makes sense. A long time ago, before human beings, two-legged creatures, were walking in the world, all the animals could talk to each other and communicate with each other. And turtles used to be very slow, close to the ground, and they had shiny, smooth shells on the back. Have you ever seen a turtle with a smooth shell? You have? Oh my goodness gracious. Well, anyway, one day, little turtle was listening to some birds talking about their adventures flying up in the sky. And they mentioned how they flew all over the place and they saw all kinds of things and how they were flying real fast. The little turtle was just moving really slow, and he felt really sad. And he started crying. And he said, "I wish I could fly, but I'm down here on the ground and I'm always slow. I'm last to go anywhere because I'm so slow. And these birds can fly and go real fast." And he said, "Creator, why can't I fly?" And Creator said, "Little turtle, be happy with what you are. All of us have different gifts. You have a nice, strong shell. So whenever you're in danger, you can pull back your legs and pull in your head and be safe in your shell and nothing can hurt you. Birds can't do that. So you should be happy being what you are, little turtle. You are a turtle, you're not a bird." And he said, "Okay." He was still sad and he was sniffing and crying. And some birds heard him and they said, "What's wrong, little turtle?" And he said, "I want to fly. I want to fly like a bird. I want to be fast. I don't want to be slow like I am all the time. But you wouldn't understand because you're not a turtle." And then he went on his little way. And the birds felt sorry for little turtle. So they said, they came up with a plan. They decided they were going to get a strong stick. And they were going to ask little turtle to hold on to the stick. And they were going to lift that stick up off the ground and fly little turtle all over the place so he could fly like a bird. So they went to little turtle and said, "Little turtle, today you're going to fly like a bird." And little turtle said, "Okay, what do I have to do?" And they said, "Well, you see this strong stick? We want you to hold on tight, and then we're going to lift you up and fly you around. Do you understand?" He said, "Okay." So the two birds came over with a big stick. One was on one side of the stick holding on. The other bird was on the other side of the stick holding on. And they said, okay, little turtle, hold on tight. You're going to fly. And little turtle said, all righty. And he was holding on to the stick. And then the birds were lifting it up as they were flying up. And little turtle said, whee, I'm flying. And the birds went zoom. Whoa, little turtle was having a wonderful time. Zoom. And little turtle was flying all over the place, holding on to that stick tightly with the birds. Oh, I'm flying. And he was so happy, he clapped his hands. Uh-oh. They told him to hold on to that stick. And he fell down, down, down. And he landed on his back. Oh, he was in pain. Oh, the Creator said, little turtle, I told you to be happy the way you were, but you didn't listen. You were flying like a bird. And little turtle said, I know I didn't listen. I should have listened to you, but now, oh, my back hurts. And the Creator said, little turtle, you're going to live. Now here's what I want you to do. I want you to pull yourself up as strongly as you can. And I want you to flip over and get on your four legs. You understand? Little turtle said, yes, Creator. Oh, and he pulled himself up. And the animals came around and they looked at Turtle, and everyone was shocked. And they said, oh my gosh, look at little Turtle's back. The animals just couldn't believe what had happened to little Turtle. Oh, they were so surprised. He used to have a beautiful, smooth, shiny shell. It was so shiny you could almost reflect the sun from it. But now, it was all broken up into different pieces. As a matter of fact, the middle part of his back had 13 different pieces. And the outside of his back, around the middle, had 28 different pieces. But you know, there was a reason for this. Our cousins, the Mayans in Mexico, used to keep calendars, and in their calendars, each year had 13 months, and each month had 28 days. So little Turtle's back showed time. It showed that little Turtle was given a gift from the Creator of months and days to enjoy his life. And since that time, whenever you see a turtle with the 13 different pieces in the middle of his shell in the back and 28 smaller pieces around the middle, remember, that's because one day turtles could fly.